by facing your demons, by overcoming your challenges, the parts of you that need to die will die. The parts of you that need to ascend and transform will ascend, and you'll be left with the refined soul and the integrated self, and that is becoming who you're truly supposed to be. So I read a quote in a book this morning about the spiritual life. So the quote was, "To live a spiritual life, we must first find the courage to enter into the desert of loneliness and change it by gentle and persistent efforts into a garden of solitude." I used to have a lot of internal turmoil and conflict, and it's something I've put my efforts towards, and this is the bit that really stood out to me. Through gentle and persistent efforts, this is a process of internal alchemy, spiritual alchemy. We change that desert of loneliness into a garden of solitude. And this kind of really gives a good metaphor towards the process that we go through internally when we grow spiritually. We begin this process of internal transformation, and the phrase I like to use to describe it is the internal landscape. So most people go through life and their attention is always pointed outwards. We never take the time to sit still and actually turn inwards and see what's actually going on inside. And so many negative patterns and behaviors and lifestyle choices that we make are a result of this sort of internal conflict. And what I've learned since being on my journey is that when I take my attention and start turning it inwards, I discover this whole landscape within me, which at first was very turbulent. And at first it wasn't a nice place to be, if I'm honest. But through the practices of meditation, of mindfulness, learning how to navigate myself internally and how to build a beautiful landscape within me, my life has completely changed. Your entire world that you perceive is a direct reflection of your internal state. Everything that you experience outwardly is just a mirror. So if we can get that right, if we can get the internal landscape right, then the world and the life that will be reflected to us will be much more coherent, we'll find much more peace, and it will be much more enjoyable because we'll be able to move through life in a much more easeful and grounded way. We can also learn to find meaning in our journey through the process of spiritual alchemy, awakening to the spiritual reality, finding meaning in life, and finding our sense of purpose. And all of this is going to help us to understand our life in a much better way. So to look at the process of internal alchemy, or spiritual alchemy, we can look at the hero's journey. Now this is a very common story that is told throughout time, throughout history. Many books and films follow this kind of trajectory. And it's also the journey that we go on individually ourselves as we come to awaken and as we face our trials and tribulations and become the person we're supposed to be. We go through our own version of this, the hero's journey, where the old self dies and the new self is reborn. And the hero's journey goes a little bit like this. The hero leaves home a naive and foolish wanderer. So at this point, the hero is ignorant, the hero is foolish, naive, he doesn't have any life experience, he doesn't really know the troubles he's going to get himself into. Maybe he's very optimistic about life, maybe he's not very realistic, but he's going out into the world trying to figure things out. Now at this point, his naivety can often lead him to come into some challenges, and sometimes there's a fall from grace down into the pit of despair. Maybe there's life challenges, maybe there's adversity, maybe there's a rock bottom. But this is a fundamental part of the journey for the hero. This is a necessary requirement for the transformation. We need to hit that rock bottom. We need to have that fall from grace to then be able to overcome adversity. Because what overcoming adversity does for us is it builds the character traits that we need to develop in order to become this final form, to become the most full version of ourselves, to become the hero that returns home. By overcoming his adversity, the hero is severely tested. And this is a spiritual test in many ways. Next, the hero enters the desert of loneliness. So this is where he's at a lost end. He doesn't know what to do. He's stranded, he's wandering, he's lonely. Maybe he's in that place of isolation. And that's a place that I can relate to very intimately, and I'm sure many of us can. When we're going through this adversity, sometimes we feel isolated, we feel lonely. But this is the process of transformation here. We turn that desert of loneliness into a garden of solitude, through the act of spiritual practice, through the act of internal alchemy. Next, you slay the dragon, facing your fears metaphorically. And Joseph Campbell, who's a famous mythologist, has this quote, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." In the spiritual sense, the cave you fear to enter is often the depths of your psyche, looking at our demons. This is facing our fears, confronting our true selves, our shadow. And this is where the idea of shadow work comes from. It's about looking at that darkest stuff, being able to face it and confront it, but also then being able to integrate it, being able to love those parts of you. And by doing that, we then integrate those parts of ourselves that we cut off for so long. And in that process, we then become more whole and the heart can begin to awaken. So many of us are cut off from our true nature because we deny parts of ourselves. Those parts of us that are in the shadow we don't want to look at, and we cut ourselves off, and then we become fragmented. So part of this journey is about becoming whole. It's about taking those parts of us that we don't like to look at and integrating them in a healthy way. And we can only do that by facing our fears, by confronting our demons, and by doing the inner work. And by entering that cave that we fear, we go through the other side of it, and that's the peace we're trying to find. That's the treasure that we're looking for. It's that integration of the self. It's that becoming whole. It's awakening the heart. It's becoming who you're truly meant to be. And it's making peace with your past. It's making peace with your demons. By doing that, we slay the dragon and we return home a victor. And that's the final end of the journey, is you return home a changed man with the courage, strength, wisdom, and integrity that you've developed along the way. This man here, the naive fool, very ignorant and innocent in nature, but he could never become this man if he had never gone through these challenges, if he had never had to face adversity, go to rock bottom, and slay the dragon. He would never have become this man. And this is where we have to begin to start relating it to ourselves, to our own personal journey. That's what these myths have always been trying to tell us. It's not about the story and about the character in the story. It's about the part of us that it awakens. It's about the part of us that can relate to it and see ourselves in that journey. So the process of spiritual alchemy is facing your fears, doing the inner work, confronting your demons, and then doing the spiritual practice, taking what you've learned, connecting with something bigger than yourself, finding your purpose in life, and doing your practice to take your internal landscape and turn it into a beautiful garden of solitude. We no longer have to sit with this inner turmoil. We're able to process things and we're able to find that inner peace. And today, in myself, my internal landscape is a beautiful place to be. Through using my intention and my visualizations, through using my meditations, I've created a state of harmony within myself. So that's the process of being able to find that garden of solitude within. As much as we have to take care of ourselves and our space in the physical world, we equally have to take care of our internal space. And that's what's really going to help us change our lives the most, by changing our internal state. Another aspect of this is the collective healing. What does the hero learn along the way? And what does he bring back to his community when he returns through the experience and wisdom that he's gained? How is he then not only healing himself, but collectively healing his community? And it's about turning your lead into gold. So the original idea of alchemy was that the chemists and the mystics would take lead and they would turn it into gold. But again, this is just a metaphor. The real process of alchemy is the internal alchemy. It's the refining of the soul. It's the death of the ego, and it's becoming who you truly are. And by going through this journey, by facing your demons, by overcoming your challenges, the parts of you that need to die will die. The parts of you that need to ascend and transform will ascend, and you'll be left with the refined soul and the integrated self. And that is becoming who you're truly supposed to be. So this is a beautiful process to go through yourself. If you're struggling with challenges at the moment, take this into your own hands. See it as a way to become who you're supposed to be and step into your power. Take responsibility for your life and see how it all happens for a purpose. And if you're struggling and you need help, feel free to reach out, leave me a comment, drop me a message. I myself have been through drug addiction, mental health crisis, psychosis, dark night of the soul, all that stuff, spiritual awakening. So one thing that's been massively important to me is to make sure I reach out and seek help when I need it. And with that being said, I appreciate your time for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more videos on self-mastery, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.